Senator Rubio, were you shocked that Mark Penn, a Democratic pollster, wants an investigation of ABC?
Well, I think it was obvious to a lot of people that were watching. Look, I mean, and what debate do you have one person? By the way, they were wrong on a couple of their fact checks as well.
I know.
And Kamala Harris had a bunch of things she said that could have been fact checked. The whole Charlottesville hoax, I mean, that's been out debunked now by, mainstream media outlets. That's why they don't say it anymore. They allowed her to say that. They allowed her to lie about January 6th. In particular, the people, police officers were killed by the rioters and the protesters there. That was also not true. Not to diminish what happened that day, but that didn't happen. So on a number of instances where they were just and they also allowed her to get beyond the fact-checking stuff. The first question out of the box was, what are you going to do to improve the economy? And the way that question should have been phrased is, you've been vice president for 3.5 years, senator before that. What are you going to do now that you didn't stand for before to help the economy? And she proceeded to give talk about her biography, that she came from a middle-class family, and then very vague concepts about how many houses the federal government's going to build and things of this nature, and didn't really press her on it at all. So it was really a poorly run debate. But, I think it helps Trump. People see this, and it reaffirms in their mind just how much outlets like ABC News and others hate President Trump and want him to lose, and every chance they get to put their thumbs on the scale, they do it.
Just watching you, talking to you now, I remember you were trying to work out immigration reform right before you ran for president. And think about when President Trump first talked about the wall, they said he was great and he was terrible and it's racist to talk about that. And sanctuary cities were great, and it shows you have a big heart. Think about how much we've changed as a country. Nobody talks about sanctuary cities now. Nobody talks about how walls don't work and the borders in control. And now I'm seeing cities like small towns like Aurora and Springfield and small towns in Pennsylvania that are now cities being taken over and disrupted by illegal immigrants dumped in there without any notice to the mayors or the governors. Think this could be an election issue that is really bigger than anyone can imagine. Do you feel I'm overstating that?
No, I think it's exactly right, especially if you live in these cities that have faced the fact that the federal government has brought people into this country and literally dumped them on you. And that's what they've done in a number of places. It's no longer just Chicago. It's no longer just New York. You're seeing it all over the country in places like Aurora, Colorado. And some of the places where you see it happening are cities that proudly bragged about how they were sanctuary cities and they would welcome everybody. Not so much anymore. By the way, talking about walls reminds me, Kamala Harris has a commercial out there on immigration that shows an image of a wall. The very thing she says was a symbol of hatred and racism and xenophobia. It tells you how much the issues change. Look, at the end of the day, I thought the most powerful moment in the debate was the last statement that President Trump made, which is, you've been vice president for 3.5 years. You own everything this administration did. You were a senator before that. All these things you're talking about now, why haven't you done those things while you've been there? You've been in a position. You're not some outsider running for office. You're as inside as you can be. Kamala Harris is as insider as you can get as vice president. Why haven't you done these things already? And I think a lot of voters picked up on that. There's a big difference between impressing the media class and the punditry and impressing voters. Two very different universes. And I think what's going to decide this election is not the pundits, it's the voters.
It's so interesting because I flipped around to see some of these voter panels, the undecideds, the independents, and I thought for sure they were just going to say Harris looked better, she looked convincing. And they're still up in the air because they want a few questions answered. It's going to affect their lives, not who looked better and sounds better. So I find it fascinating. So many independents, undecideds are just that today still with 50 days left. And finally, not so much about the election, but about America. China is not just a threat to Taiwan. They're a threat to us, but the insidious way in which they're doing it is noteworthy. Now we have a Communist Party link right around the commissioner of police who has since resigned. We know that there has been a key aide to 2 governors of New York with Chinese Communist Party links with this huge house in Manhasset, now under massive investigation. We know about Chinese police stations in America policing Chinese citizens and others here on visas. What's going on? Are we allowing a slow-motion invasion?
By the way, interesting, not a single question on China in that debate. The single biggest geopolitical challenge America faces in the 21st century. The Chinese have figured out that the way to influence America is not necessarily at the federal level where there's a lot of scrutiny, and they're aiming at local governments, they're aiming at state government officials, at the business class, and universities, obviously, but they're really focusing very heavily now on local and state government. Mayors, commissioners, people at the county level, employees of local government, because there's not nearly enough scrutiny. There's not nearly enough scrutiny. Yeah, I think China is trying to infiltrate every aspect of our life, and more importantly, they want to message anyone who has links to China. Your relatives might still live there, whatever. They want you to know that their arms are very long, and that if you are here talking bad about China, they can reach out and touch you. And in fact, what you have seen on many occasions is that these police officers they have over here are actually going to people's homes and saying, if you don't come back to China, or at least you don't stop talking bad about us, your relatives, your parents, your cousins, your brothers or sisters in China are going to have a very hard time. They're using that to sort of try to coerce people to come back to China. They've used that against people speaking on Tibet, on Uyghur issues, and on China issues more broadly. And they have figured out the way to do that is at the local government level. And it is very concerning because I just don't think there's enough awareness about how much they're doing that at the state and local level. We need to really amp that up.
If you get the majority and Republicans get the White House, can you do something about it?
Sure. I think it's one of the things the FBI should be focused on like a laser. Every field office, every FBI field office in America has to become much more aggressive about interacting with local government officials, not just electeds, but bureaucrats and so forth, about Chinese practices, about things to look out for in how they try to influence local government decisions on everything from contracting, who it is we hire to build a train system or a road or whatever, all the way from that to this notion of some local law enforcement agency being encouraged to do the Chinese government's bidding for them. I think the FBI field offices need to be all over that, and more aggressively than they are right now.
And I also think downtown and Wall Street, they got to wake up and understand that's a national security problem, especially as it relates to military weaponry and some of the material we depend on China to give us. And the rare earth as we green our economy. Senator Marco Rubio, always insightful, always interesting, and I know President Trump is going to be calling on you in these last 50 days. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks. Thank you.